and their support and their determination, as well as the residents of this particular stretch of the road, who we have called the Frithwood 14. We stand in the section of road in front of these neighbours who will suffer the most at the heart of this link road, and today is very much about that. If you are not already on Flag, then my email address is on any of these boards that you can see. Just email and I'll add you to the distribution list as well. So I'm going to hand over to Gavin. He's going to start the meeting, and together we will raise some of your valid concerns. Thank you again for being here, because we value your time enormously. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you for attending. I am also going to read from the script because this is an emotive subject, and to make sure we do cover it in a clear and concise way. Sorry, I'm shouting now. I'm going to read from a script to ensure that I keep everything in order and I don't forget any salient points. However, to start with, we have received apologies from Andrew Schrader, Richard Moore and Daniel Lawrence. However, we have with us today leader of the council, Councillor Baggott. Oh, right, okay. I'm going to shout! Today we have the leader of Basildon Council, Councillor Baggott, and he is here with Councillors David Dadds, Kevin Blake and Anthony Headley. John Barron had a prior engagement today and sends his apologies. I was at a meeting last night and he couldn't make that too, so that's two he's missed. But he has sent a letter and I will read out the salient points. It goes blah blah blah, then it goes, I am liaising with Basildon Borough Council and in particular with its leader, Mr Andrew Baggott, on the issue of building on Greenbelt land for housing. In conjunction with other local MPs, I am also supporting Basildon Council in its efforts to reduce the housing targets in the local plan, and this has involved us writing to the government. More broadly, planning is devolved matter for the local council and your elected councillors, who are best placed to ensure that the needs of the local community are met. As an MP, my role is to shield the local council from unnecessary intervention from outside bodies such as the Planning Inspectorate in British or the government in Whitehall to help ensure local decisions prevail. Everyday decisions about individual planning applications, such as the one you raised with me, are rightly considered on their merits by the local council. I would just reply to that by saying, if this goes through, it's in principle and it's a done deal, and the local planning applications for each part of it will more or less be subject to controversy because the main plan has been agreed. Before I start going into the specifics of Frithwood Lane, I would just like to say to those Billericay residents from around Billericay that collectively we can work together for the benefit of Billericay. If you are from Mount Nessing Road, Potash Road, South End Road, Greens Farm Lane or any others within the borough where there are sites identified within the local plan, get talking to your neighbours, as they need to know how Billericay in your area will change everyone's life if the local plan is approved. I think I can say that we're not against building in Billericay or the borough, but it must be a good local plan. So to Frithwood Lane, where you're now standing. On Sunday 3rd of January, the council released on its website, without notice to residents, further details of the local plan. This has included documents 26, 27, 28 and 29, which are pertinent to Billericay and the Relief Road, where you now stand. The release was in advance of the Strategic Planning Committee on the 11th of January, which the geeks amongst us watched on YouTube. The gist of the proposal says that there will be a link road from the A176 roundabout, up over there, at the top of Noak Hill Road, through the area known as H17D, which is the field just there, and at the end of Frithwood Lane, through some houses of Frithwood Lane, over Ty Common Road, round the edge of the new housing, and onto Laindon Road. As you can see where we're standing now, this will be a significant pinch point with cars able to drive at 30 miles an hour. 14 houses will be seriously impacted as the council are planning to take land from front gardens and increase the land requirement by land grab, so even further land both sides. The documents also state that one house will have to go to make the road work. As far as we are aware, no one from the council has approached the resident in Frithwood Lane 14 to discuss this. We only found out through the reading of documents. This is a residential lane, and if the local plan keeps this road in and gets it approved, there are serious consequences for the residents. I will list them. There's quite a lot, but I will list them quickly. Houses in this area have been blighted and will remain blighted for years if the local plan goes through. Access to our houses. How can we navigate going in and out when the road is right next to our houses? Deliveries to residential properties will block the road. How much traffic will come through Frithwood Lane? In the report to the council, it's estimated 1,600 vehicles an hour at peak times. Noise pollution. We will need triple glass. Noise pollution. Air quality pollution. They're not concerned with. They're concerned with the A127, but Frithwood Lane, no. Make as much noise as you like. The traffic modelling has used an example of an articulated lorry being able to navigate through this link road. To put this in perspective, they've compared this with a refuge lorry. An articulated lorry is more than twice the length of a refuge lorry. Essex highways work to a standard template for the various roads, A roads, B roads, etc. In the case of Frithwood Lane, they're compromising on the design, such as reduced width of footpaths, which will make it dangerous for residents walking along the proposed link road. Most houses in Frithwood Lane have dropped curbs for vehicle access, which will still be needed, so assume there will be no curb along most of Frithwood Lane. Residents all along the south of the link road, so that's everyone all the way through, and if the new developments go through to Laindon Road, I've lost my place, will be endangered trying to cross to get to the town, schools, shops, etc. Local rat runs will be created in 1st and 2nd Avenue, Wiggins Lane, Scrub Rise, Tylands. Developers have all been saying that residents can walk to the shops. How can you shop on foot if you're with children, doing a weekly shop, and in bad weather? It's unrealistic. The Oak Hill Road part of the link road is on a hill, so in bad weather and with general speeding traffic, we'll have to negotiate bends in the road, especially at Frithwood Close and at the Ty Common Road crossover. The field, which is designated H17D, is on a hill. That's that one up there. And even now, water runs off the field. With urbanisation, nothing will stop the water running into Frithwood Lane. Diverting traffic through a residential area is not the answer. The link road is just an access road for developers. It is far worse than expected. However, the government have announced today a new initiative with Chris Boardman on cycling and walking and a provision to include this on all roads. That will be interesting to see how they fit it in here. This is to be applauded, but it won't help day-to-day life. I would now like to offer the councillors an opportunity to answer questions from residents. I know Councillor Headley needs to disappear, and I think he wanted to sort of come over first. So if I can ask Councillor Headley. Because he had to go. Councillor Headley, are you here? No? Okay, if he turns up. Do the councillors want to come over here so you're more visible?
Yeah, I come over here.
I've just been told Councillor Headley's wife is poorly, so he's had to go. So we respect that. One of the first questions I have for the councillors is, would one of you... One of the first questions I have for councillors, and I hope the councillors can shout, is, would one of you be the first councillor to explain to us what the benefit of this plan is to Billericay? Over to the councillors.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, excellent. First of all, I just want to say that I and my colleagues, you are pushing on against an open door when it comes to issues around Frithwood Lane. I actually believe that any development anywhere in the borough should be complementary to a community. It shouldn't be to the detriment and destroying a community. And I have to be careful what I say from planning law right now, because of course what I don't want to do in the planning process is put myself in a position where I recuse myself from being able to represent via planning the public. But I actually think that the idea of Frithwood Lane is fundamentally flawed. It's a personal view. And what we will be doing is working with you, the residents, to actually fight the development in the state that it currently is. To that extent, what I want to do is just be very clear about what the meeting is on Thursday. The meeting on Thursday of the council is not to pass the local plan. It's a meeting that's been held on the instruction of the planning inspector, and the planning inspector has instructed the council to go out and consult with the public. Now, we could choose to vote against that and say we don't take that recommendation on board and we're not going to consult with the public, and all that would do is shift the local plan straight to the examination in public in full. And we believe that the inspector is right, that the public should be consulted, and that this is your opportunity to say where you think things are wrong. The planning inspector initially had said he wanted it to be only online, and we pushed back on that and said that we feel that residents might not have the ability to contribute online, or might not choose to, and might want to actually submit their ideas and their objections in writing. And that is also now going to happen. He's accepted that, so you will be able to take part in the consultation either online or in writing. And all of these don't go to the council, they will go direct to the planning inspector. Now, once the planning inspector has heard those objections or the consultation, he will then take a view, and what then happens is the examination in public for the local plan begins. And there, what you will have is you will have a lot of developers. I've got a lot of kind words for developers, so if there's any here, I apologise. They will turn up with their lawyers, who they're paying huge amounts of money to represent and to say why the different sites in the plan should go forward. And they've got a vested interest, because it's about making money for them, it's about making money for their shareholders, and it's about making money for the people who own the land that want to actually capitalise on that land. What I've done, I've been speaking to Deborah and Gavin. I have made representation to a legal chap who is experienced in these sort of matters, that if you want to, he can't do it at cost, he can't do it for free, but he is willing to make himself available at a lower price so that he can adequately represent you at the examination in public, should you choose to do that. And that means that you've got somebody then that speaks the same language as lawyers, that is able to represent you and make all the salient points to the planning inspector and fight the clever developer lawyers that will be there making a counter case. And let's say that you avail yourself of that. What's important about that is, as part of his evidence gathering, as part of the process, what he should be able to do is put together for you a document that, were the planning inspector to be unmoved, and were the planning inspector to then decide that he's not listening to the objections that have been raised, and it then goes to planning, you will have the ability to represent yourselves, and this is where we as councillors come in as well, to be able to represent you, to object at the planning point if it ever gets that far. But the other thing that's really important on this, and there's 2 points I'd like to make. First of all, with regard to modifications to the local plan, when Frithwood Lane first was put forward, the proposal was you were going to have 3 developers doing these sites. And my concern was, because developers will use any excuse or trick they can to try and get around their obligations, that they would put forward part of the site at one point, wait a bit, then put forward the other site, then a little bit later put forward the 3rd site, so that it's all below the threshold for infrastructure, so they don't have to stump up the money. And one important modification of the local plan, the inspector and officers have listened to us, it now says that it doesn't matter whether it's 1 developer or 3 developers, all the money has to be paid up first, all the money has to be provided for that to take place. And that's £25 million. Now, personally, I've seen developers almost at the wall. We've seen Infrared in the town centre going to administration. We've had G8 who put forward a site in the town centre that have now sold it on because they can't develop it. I actually believe the developers are brassic right now, and I'd be highly surprised personally if they stump up the £25 million. But the fact is, and I've been very, very clear with officers, and I've been very, very clear right the way through with the local plan, which is the legal framework to make sure this happens, no developer will be coming to our planning committee unless they have the money and provide the infrastructure first. Nothing will happen, because without infrastructure, everything else falls apart. So we have the local plan examination in public, which I'm hoping you will avail yourself of the legal chap and be able to represent yourselves in a better way. If the planning inspector is unmoved, the next stage will be for the developers to put up the site for development. They will have to have the money up front in order to even come to the planning committee, and then the planning committee at that stage would listen to the issues. Now I'm aware, and I've seen on social media, there are people that have raised issues about gas pipes, which I think is a really valid point. I think there are some really, really clear material considerations from a planning perspective why the site is totally inappropriate anyway. So I am absolutely for representing you guys, and I'm absolutely for the fact that I believe this is a wrong development as a whole, but the Frithwood Relief Road even more so, and I think it's fundamentally wrong that people should be having to give up driveways and land, and I think Gavin articulated very well all the issues around Frithwood Lane. So in that, you have my absolute support in representing you and making sure that you fight your corner.
Obviously, I'm Councillor Dad. I'm not in Andrew's management team. I'm the mayor, so I stay out of politics. But unfortunately, I can't agree entirely with what Andrew has said. It's much more simple. It is a complex process, but let me explain it simply as I see it, in lay terms. The local plan has to go through a process. We have to have a local plan. We are charged to go through a process. And we call out to landowners to put forward their land. We don't choose. They come forward. It's a process. But we as a council, clearly as councillors, we don't want Greenbelt developed. And we as a council should, and councillors, speak out on behalf of residents and say no. I do not agree that the plan as it is now, next week, will just be for public consultation. There's been modifications that have taken place that has not come to council. I've not been aware of. I've got the agenda last night, 1,200 pages. I've read through some of it. There's a 50% increase in Greenbelt land being proposed to develop should there be a shortfall of other land. That's never come to full council for discussion, and I will not be voting for an increase in Greenbelt development. I've made it clear from the start to the finish. I wrote to the inspector and to council officers in November 2018 and was very concerned that there had been an increase in housing in Billericay by about 1,700 houses or thereabouts, without any public consultation, without any decision, and that we were being forced to try to add numbers on and forced by officers to push through plans. There is government pushing us to have a plan. There's a council officers pushing through their agenda, and we have councillors, us, and we represent the residents. And I have made it very clear that there are a number of changes and modifications that have been made without the residents being consulted. And it's too late. If it goes to council for a vote, that's a democratic vote for that plan to be approved with the modifications as it's being approved, whether that's through committee or full council adopting those recommendations. And it's at that stage councillors need to stand up and say, no, we don't want that. We want to make proposed changes, or our voices should be heard. So I certainly will need to have a discussion with the leader and the chairman of the infrastructure committee urgently, because I've been reassured that there have been no changes since November. I read the papers from yesterday and there are changes. So tell me about those changes. Let the councillors have a debate. Let us have a debate and understand what's going on. If it's as Andrew has said, then that's straightforward. But it's certainly not on my reading, and I want an explanation from officers. What is going on? and what is going on with the green belt, because I understand there is a requirement in relation to need, housing need, and I don't agree with the numbers and the formula, but that's set by government, and that's where John Barron should be here, and John Barron should be lobbying the government to change that formula. Where is he? He needs to be here and speak up. He can't delegate and refuse to say it's a local process. Yes, applications, the local plan, yes, but to lobby government because the formula is set by government. And so therefore there is some change that ministers can do and make. And that's why we have members of parliament to lobby government for that change. So there is a role that he has to play. There's a role that I have to play as a ward councillor. There's a role for the leader to play. Yeah? So we've all got to play our part because we're all in these cogs and we can't pass it to other people. At the end of the day, if a plan is passed, that will be the basis of which applications are judged against. So, and if it's been passed by the inspector, been approved by us, at the end of the day, that will be the benchmark of which applications are judged. Greenbelt, though, however, Greenbelt we have the national policy framework that sets out very clearly and succinctly that Greenbelt should only be developed in exceptional circumstances. Yeah. We now know, I've seen another change to the plan modification that says, well, actually, we won't apply that rule to schools and other types of public buildings. Well, that's a change that I've never been debated on. If someone's developing the land, that should include already the land for that type of infrastructure, not to grab another piece of Greenbelt. Greenbelt is being increased by 50% from this plan, from 4% when it was proposed before to 6% now, without discussion from me as a councillor. No one's involved me. You can't tell me I've got to go to every committee of the council to understand the council business. That's not structure. Everyone feeds back. You have a group. Everyone should be discussing these issues and we should have debate. And at the end of the day, we have those debates privately sometimes and in public. So I've had to speak now because so that you understand the role of a ward councillor is different to the sort of the administration where you have members and chairmen of committee. So there should be that discussion. I'm certainly going to stand here and say, as a not your ward councillor for this road, for Pothash Road, I'm standing up saying no. That's a completely inappropriate development and it should not happen. I'm voted by the residents to stand up for you, for your views, not for council officers, not for someone in government, not for an MP that's not here. I'm here for you and I'm going to say no on Thursday. I mean, I want to know what's going on. So I will certainly be calling out for you.
And glad what Councillor Dad said, and one thing he is right about, is we have written to the government on more than one occasion, and in fact I'm publishing the responses on my Facebook page, hopefully on Monday, where we have said that the OAN numbers, and OAN numbers for those that don't know, is the government's formula. I have said time and time again that to say you've got one size fits all formula that tells you how many houses you need is absolutely bonkers. I've got as much chance of telling you what the weather's going to be like here this time next year as I have of knowing what amount of people there are going to be living in this borough next year. And to have a formula which isn't reflective of local circumstances is bonkers mental. I've raised that with the MPs, and to be fair, they have written to the Secretary of State, and I'm not going to apologise for the government on this. You get a mealy-mouthed response which says one thing on one side and something else on the other, but where the clear message was, yes, it's down to you, but it's actually not down to you. Yes, we understand what you're saying, but actually we're not listening to what you're saying, and it's all ministerial doublespeak, but ending with, and we want you to get on with it. And you can see those responses, and you'll be able to see them on the Facebook page this time hopefully by Monday afternoon. I'm also doing a video which explains the local planning process, so that if you want to watch it again and again, not that you want to see my mug again and again, but it'll be there for you to be able to follow, and there will be a process where people can ask further questions on that. But the other thing that we are pushing ministers on, you'll know that we recently had DEFRA come down on the council about air quality. Well, tell me this, how can you build thousands and thousands of houses with no road infrastructure to support it, and then not have a problem with air quality? And the question I've asked, which nobody has answered me, is who wins? Is it air quality more important, or is it the houses more important? Now to me, it's the air quality, because that's quality of life. And therefore, you want to have a community that is a fit community, that is a thriving community, not one that's actually polluted out of existence and actually has got all the issues with lack of infrastructure. And we will continue to push government. I spoke to a legal counsel recently. He had a proposal. He's been very, very good at working out through solutions and issues that we have. It's not a good one as far as I'm concerned, because his proposal was that we continue to fight the battle on the numbers, but do it via a paper that we put to government and get other people, other councils nationally to lobby the government. But to be honest, while that's a long game and might get the government to rethink at some point, it's not the short game, and the short game right now is representing you, it's representing you adequately, but more importantly, it's stopping Frithwood Lane going ahead.
Yes, yeah.
Can I just add to that, just to make it quite clear, I don't know how you mentioned it, but this meeting on Thursday is not to vote through the local plan. It is so you have a chance to represent yourselves and anybody else within the borough wants to represent themselves. It is literally that simple. We've all had loads of emails, I must say, and not been the articulate emails that have come through have been absolutely brilliant. If half of them go forward to the inspector and whatnot, well, you know, it'll baffle him. But the points you've made, it comes from the heart as well, which is important. But the most important thing to get through your minds is, because we've had so many emails saying, don't vote for this on Thursday, don't vote for this on Thursday. We don't vote for it, you will not be consulted on. It is that simple. So it has to be voted on. We will support it, and the rationale behind that is so that you then have a voice. If we don't, you have no voice. The inspector will say, well, I want you to consult. You didn't want to consult the residents. I'll make my own mind up. What I have said quite clearly is, with all your representation and our representations going in, if the inspector, let's be absolutely blunt about this, if the inspector at the end of the day says, I hear everything you say, but you know what, I don't give a monkeys. Well, do you think that we're going to take kindly to that when it comes to the planning process? Obviously, we'll have to have rationale reasons to refuse any planning, but having seen what you put there with the gas pipes and all that that are coming forward, we'll certainly have that. And we'll fight tooth and nail to stop any development going forward. That's the reality of it. It is quite simple. Thursday night is not, and I can't say it enough times, is not to vote through the local plan. It is that simple. It is so you, every one of you, can have a voice. And that's what all we're asking for. That is it.
And please, and I'm sure I'm actually pushing against an open door on this, please, you're all here, use that voice. Every single one of you, please write to the planning inspector, give a view. It would probably help you for it not to be a standard template view, because he'll just look at one and then not read them. You've all done very well on your emails. Pen an email, pen a letter, contribute on the website via the portal that's going to be constructed for doing it online. Please, all of you, give a view. Be as eloquent as you have been so far. Be as passionate as you have been so far, because that will add weight to what the planning inspector has to consider. At the end of the day, he might be a public servant, he might be a form of civil servant, but he still has to listen. Part of the planning process is to listen to the residents. It's him that's instructed us to consult. He wants to hear the views of the public, so damn well give him your views and make sure that you represent yourselves, please.
Excuse me, can I just add, please? Can I come back? I'm going to be chairing the meeting next week. As you know, as Mayor, I chair the council meetings. The full recommendation on the agenda, which I received last night, 1,200 pages nearly, notes the proposed modifications to the plan as agreed by the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee on the 25th November, 20th of December, 2001, 11th of January 2022. I've looked at some of those modifications and there are some changes since the November 2018. So therefore, it is not just to say, in part, there is, I accept, in part, it's to go out to public consultation, but it's to note the changes that have been agreed by another committee of the council. The full council's never debated that, And that's what I'm saying is wrong. And so it's not as simple as being put. I'm sure they're not intending to mislead you, because they're my colleagues. Yes? So there's not a conflict. I'd rather have the debate openly. It's not behind closed doors. I'm saying I'm chairing this meeting. I've asked the question. If it is, as you simply say, to go to you to have a voice, why don't I just have it in plain English? We, the council, vote for the public to have a say. Well, it doesn't say that. If you try to unpick what is being said, you need to be a lawyer like me. I'm a barrister, I'm a solicitor. I know how to read documents. And when I read that, I think, what's going on? If it's as simple as go to the public to consult, then say it. But there are modifications here that have been made by another committee of the council. And some of those changes are fundamental. Greenbelt increased from 4% to 6%. That's a 50%. Greenbelt land being used for other public realm buildings like schools. Well, that wasn't there before. Housing numbers increased, only by a small part, but still increased without debate. And then I've already pointed out in a letter, and I've asked Sue to circulate it, that I already said Billericay had an increase of between, I think it was 1,500 and 1,700 homes. And the reason why that was, we agreed, I think originally, about 940. Then we had to accept about 1,500. We have to accept we need homes. Some of you don't want it, and there are many people that also want it. It's an argument that is from both sides, because people need homes. However, when there was a change of administration, and I'm not getting political, there was a change, and the Labour-led administration, by Councillor Harrison over in Whitford as well, put an extra 1,500, 1,700 homes into the plan that was not consulted on. Increased Potash Road considerably. That's my ward, and that's why I took an interest. And I wrote a letter, which I like to have circulated, where I raised the point that there's been an increase to nearly 3,000 homes in Billericay, which will be developed on Greenbelt, and will be developed first, because it has a higher value. Yeah, developers will come here. I know that they tell us that it'll be staged. No, this is where the profit will be. Yeah, this is where it will be developed first. So I'm saying that those homes, these modifications, we need to debate properly so that we have a voice as a council when we vote, so the inspector knows where we stand, and then you can join us, because I'm sure I'm speaking as you want me to speak. In other words, we share a common view that Frithwood Lane should not be developed. Greenbelt should not be developed. There's obviously an argument of what's Greenbelt, what is acceptable, but I'm not getting into that. But I know we need to protect our spaces, and it's only in exceptional circumstances should it be developed, and that is rare. 3,000 homes in Billericay over the next 20 years, and where they're going. We already have a problem with the doctors, we have a problem with the schools, we have a problem with traffic in pinch points. We live here, we know it. Yeah, it's not good enough. So we say no to that. I challenge Councillor Bake and the leader to discuss at group and convince me, and I will come back here and apologise in front of you all to Councillor Baggett and Councillor Brake if I am wrong. But there are changes in that plan since November 2018 that full council has not debated and voted on.
Can I just
It's very rare that I disagree with a colleague, but I would point out that we unfortunately have a committee system which we all collectively hate, and we can all agree on that. The process of the council is we have a committee that deals with the local plan. That has dealt with each of these modifications, where all councillors were invited to go. A number of councillors did turn up to make their comments. You all watched it, because I actually was pretty clear that on Frithwood Lane we had concerns. So was Councillor Schrader, and Councillor Schrader does apologise for being here today. He didn't want to be, but it's another commitment that he has. And actually it's good, because it means that he can now, not having been involved in this, when he goes to planning, he's got the ability to sit on planning without it looking as if he's prejudged or been lobbied. So he's actually managed to, in a good way, put himself in a good position for representing your planning. But the whole committee system was the ability to contribute in that. And there is some modifications, and I'll tell you one of the most important ones, and that is the fact that this site, 817, now has to come forward, whether it's 1, 2 or 3 developers, as one project with all of the money up front. And that's fundamental, that's absolutely important, because it stops developers doing what I was worried about and trying to actually do mission creep and development creep and get away with putting their hands in their pockets and stumping up the money. But also with the local plan, something else that is fundamentally important, which we changed in 2018, and I think is really important for people to understand. At that time, under the Labour administration and UKIP at the time, they wanted to attach traveller sites to every new development. And we stopped that. And that was, again, fundamentally important, because the idea of sprinkling traveller sites right the way across the borough like fairy dust, I said just didn't fly. It wasn't going to be cohesive to communities. The travellers even said they didn't want it, but it was something that was quite important that we removed from that in order to make sure that we had a cohesive community going forwards, and that's what the local plan is. And the other thing with the local plan, which is fundamentally important, and it's just worth being aware of, because there are people who say, well, why don't you just throw out the local plan? Well, the legalities are, and we're on a conveyor belt here of planning process, unfortunately. Let's say we had no local plan at all. All the developers we're talking about, where we say we want the money, they can still develop the site. The difference is, and they can develop the site on the basis that it was in your local plan, you had the evidence of it being in the local plan, therefore it's a deliverable site. The difference is, the council would not be able to demand any infrastructure, because the legal framework of planning now is that the local plan says, here's the evidence for the infrastructure that's needed, this is the amount of money we want you to deliver it. No local plan, you don't have the ability to present that evidence, you don't have the ability to demand that money. And even at planning, you could turn around and go, we're not going to have it. No, we've got no local plan, and we're turning down the development. The developer then, and they're all in it for the money, and so the people who put up the land, they're in it for the money, they have the ability then to just appeal it, go to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State is pretty clear that in those sort of circumstances, 9 times out of 10, they will overturn the appeal, and they will let the development go ahead. Because the government are pushing for more homes, they are pushing for more houses, we are resisting that push as much as we can, using every single string in our bow to actually be resistant to that, and we will continue to do so. Because in my view, the amount of houses needed in this borough should be reflective of the actual need in this borough, and not based upon potential migration or a number that's been just made up somewhere by government as part of a formula. And we will continue, and I will always continue, as long as I'm the leader of the council, I will continue to use every single string there is to represent people, to fight the OAN numbers, and to fight unrestrained and unconstrained development in this borough.
Are you saying still that they don't have to provide the 25 million after saying that they did have to before you could go ahead?
Without a local plan, they wouldn't have to provide it, because we wouldn't have the ability to say you have to. With a local plan, we can say, here's the evidence. And we spent a lot of time. I mean, the local plan, the Councillor Downs quite rightfully, it's a weighty tome. That's not something that was dreamt of overnight. What's happened is every single part of infrastructure was looked at across the borough. The NHS were consulted, doctors were consulted, schools were consulted, the National Grid, the gas people, the fire service, police service, you name it, every single possible level of infrastructure was consulted to say, with these sites, what's needed. We had one site that was almost going to go ahead, but National Grid said, we need a new transformer, we don't have the ability to put a transformer in, you could not possibly develop that site because you wouldn't get the power, and the site failed. So all of these, we have the evidence now to be able to say to developers, here's the evidence, this is what's needed. And with Frithwood, for instance, as well as the 25 million for highways, there's also a requirement for school, and it's quite clear there what schools are needed, it's quite clear what GPs will be needed. All of those have to be provided up front in order for it to go ahead, and we have the evidence to do that under the local plan framework. Without that, it just gives the ability of developers to just come along, throw in their development and not actually stump up the cash, and that's wrong.
Yeah, Dean.
Can I just ask one question, just on what we were discussing earlier about the consultation? I'm hearing that we can only comment on the modifications, not the total plan. How's the council going to tell people how to do that? And if they do it wrong, is it going to be a void consultation?
It's a good question. For those that didn't hear it, it's consultation on the modifications. It's not consultation on the whole local plan. How do you do that? Well, as I say, it is online, and this is the planning inspector that's put it together. So I haven't seen the online proposal yet, but I am presuming, therefore, that it will go through a format of how you do that. And it is important only to do the modifications. But here's the key thing. As I said to you earlier, once the consultation is finished, which is 6 weeks, you then have the full examination in public. That examination in public is for the whole local plan, the modifications included. So anybody that's got issues with things that are in the local plan already, it's the examination in public that will give you your say. And that's where absolutely I would really, really recommend, and I've spoken to Mike Andrews and the Billericay Action Group on this, get yourself a proper legal individual that can represent you in the best way, that speaks the same language as them. The developers, I promise you, they will be there knee deep in lawyers. And you need somebody that can speak their language and fight your corner and speak the right and make the right key points that the planning inspector will listen to. And for anybody that hasn't got a life, that's been watching the appeals that have been taking place with regard to town centre planning, both the Orwell appeal and currently the Eastgate appeal, you will see the sort of debates and conversations I had. I've got to take my hat off to the lawyers that we have. They've fought the corner there for the appeals on the high-rise monstrosities that were being planned. We lost the Orwell appeal, unfortunately, but nobody that watched it could possibly say that our solicitors didn't fight a damn good fight. And you need people to fight the fight for you, and I'm hoping that the gentleman that I've recommended is the individual to do that for you, and I'm doing everything I can to persuade him to do it at as low cost as possible for you.
Thank you. Can I go to Mike? Mike Andrews.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this election broadcast. It's
Can you shout?
yeah. Sorry. Thanks to everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this election campaign. It's really been enjoyable today. If I could just clarify one issue. You talked about the 3 developers covering this site. Surely it's 4. The Southwest Master Plan talks about 4 developers, Red Row included as well. So if there's been a change, perhaps you could let us know when that happened, because we didn't notice that. You've suggested that we really should get involved in the consultation. I can take it back to 2016. Lots of people did then. I think that 40-odd% of the responses were from Billericay residents. A couple of thousand people responded, and you took great listening to what we said there, because you doubled the number of houses in the next plan. So if you're telling us we should respond to the consultation, can we have some confidence that you actually listen to us? There have been quite a few changes to the plan. Can you ever tell us one change that you put in the plan that actually came from a resident? I've seen quite a few from the county council, quite a few from developers. In fact, there's a whole series of changes that went in. So one thing to come back to, it was actually you that submitted the plan in 2019, not Labour. You could have changed it before you got back, but I think you were right about the tax on the lawn at that stage. That was a Conservative government, wasn't it? Oh, okay. But
I'm enjoying your political broadcast.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Look, the thing is, there's a lot of politics, and I want to take that out. There's a lot of changes that have been made without public consultation. I've sent that out very succinctly in my letter in November 2018 and now today. And I think it is important that I get a voice at council to debate this, and I also think the public should too. And all this about not having a plan, there are some risks. There are. However, if Greenbelt, we have national policy framework, and that still applies. That's not got rid of. If we don't have a plan, the inspector, when making a decision, will have to have regard to the national policy framework. We do have a plan, I know that. But the thing is, it's about the amendment plan. So I think there are some risks, but not as perilous on the Greenbelt. I accept that, and we do need a plan. But we need the public to engage, and we also councillors should be engaged. And all this about, you say, it's a Conservative plan. It's gone through a number of repeats and changes, and I made it quite clear that Billericay got dumped another 1,500, 1,700 homes without us even having a discussion, because the Labour administration, that was unfortunately the political colour at the time, dumped another 1,700 homes in Billericay without anyone having a say.
Yeah. Councillor Dane's absolutely right. I'll answer your questions, Mr Andrews, because first of all, it could be there's 4, and that could be my slip. I know there's 3 sites, but I know that there's been 4, they've fallen out, and they've got friends again, then they fell out again, and they've been friends again. But it doesn't matter how many developers there are, the fundamental thing is still there. That they can have 1 developer, you can have 8 developers. It doesn't matter. They've got to come up with the money first. That's the fundamental thing. In answer to your second question, which was about
can I just say, we didn't interrupt you when you were giving your speeches. I'd be really grateful if you didn't interrupt me. Is that something that's different for us? I know we're not in the council chamber now, but if we could just let me carry on. Thank you. So in 2016...
But I hadn't finished because I got interrupted.
All right, let's keep it civil. Let's start again. Come on.
Right. So if we go back to the time we were allowed to consult, and that was in 2016, that's the last opportunity we had to consult, and the view of the Billericay residents was quite clear then. The result of that was that the number of houses doubled. It doesn't matter why they doubled, but the plan that went to the planning inspector virtually doubled the number of houses. So that's the first thing. So that doesn't give us much confidence that responding to the consultation actually does us much good. I'd also make the point, you just said that we should respond to the planning inspector in bulk, but surely at the end of the last SBI meeting, didn't I hear you, Mr Baggett, saying that it'd be much better if we sent a single sensible response? The planning inspector didn't want to receive lots of responses from individuals. Perhaps I misheard what was being said on the report. But can I just go right back to, God knows how long ago it was, but the question before we started on this was, what are the benefits of Billericay? So would you like to answer the question, which we said right at the beginning, what are the benefits to Billericay and the existing residents of the local plan? It's a simple question.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll try and answer all your questions there that you asked. First of all, the consultation is a process, and we are constrained within the planning process for that. The consultation that was done was listened to. There were a lot of responses from residents, so if you asked me to pick out of the 1,200 that you admitted were sent in, which ones were listened to, I honestly couldn't do that. But the consultation is there, and it's there for a purpose, and this is taking the politics out of it. It's a planning process that's adopted in order to do that. Covering one point that you made so many, I'll try and make sure I cover them all. With regards to the fact that I said to you all right in, and this is where you've misunderstood clearly, and I apologise for that. If people have misunderstood, it's the communicator, not the communicatee. The consultation is to get your views, and that should be done individually. The representation at the examination in public, which is a separate stage, it's better to do one response so that the examiner, because what will, I've been told, tee off the examiner is if he gets 1,000 different responses to the actual examination in public, all saying the same thing. So they are different parts of the process. You have the consultation, and then you have the examination in public in full. But I thought you'd have known that, because I've sat down with you around a table on more than one occasion and gone through that, but that's by the by. What are the benefits to Billericay? Well, first of all, I've been told by a lot of residents, look, we understand there needs to be housing, but we just don't want it near us. We're not NIMBY, but we don't need it near us, so we don't need it here. It has to be, we understand that people need homes, we've got children, we've got grandchildren, we want them to be able to live in this community. We appreciate there's a need for homes being built. What the public have said to me, and I totally get it, is you can't build homes without the infrastructure. When you're struggling to get to see a doctor, you can't build extra homes and think that's going to be okay if you can't see a doctor. You can't build homes if you can't get your children into school because there's no school places. You can't build homes if you can't travel from point A to point B without being stuck in traffic for 40 minutes for what should be a 5-minute journey. You can't build homes if you actually can't get your water or your power. That's fundamental infrastructure. So the majority of people that I've spoken to have said, yes, we understand that there is a need for homes. We don't agree with the amount of homes. Now that's not our call, that's been the OAN numbers which we're fighting about. But people have said, when the homes are done, we want the infrastructure. Now I have done everything that I can, and I will continue to do everything I can. And if people give me new ideas, I will take on any new ideas to do everything I can do to guarantee to you, the public, that any development that happens will have the infrastructure. Now I can't be clearer than that. And as I say, there is not a single developer that could possibly come to a planning committee not knowing that if they don't have the money for the infrastructure, which the evidence is there for, that they won't be expected to pay for it. And I would expect, planning is something we don't whip on, planning is something that has to be completely separate from a political process, but I would be very, very disappointed in any committee that allowed a developer to rock up with a plan, say, I haven't got any money, and say, well, we're going to pass that plan. That would be bonkers mental from any committee, no matter what political persuasion.
Shout.
Building more homes. I'd like to know who you're actually speaking to, because I don't believe that. And I think if you put that actually to any sort of vote, you would lose it hands down. And that's the truth, and you should be aware of it.
Well, no, thank you, but I can only go on what people said to me, and I've had phone calls with people, I've spoken to people on the doorstep, I've spoken to people here, and I've had people say to me, we understand that there is a need for homes. Now, if people don't, what I think is wrong in this day and age, and actually I've always said, defended communities and said that, especially in Billericay, it's a tolerant, it's a fair-minded, it's a community-minded community, but if I get a phone call from someone in tears because their 21-year-old son is living in a car in the 21st century because they haven't got a house, that's wrong. That's wrong by any stretch of the imagination. And the idea that you can have somebody living in a car is wrong.
Right, we'll do the next question. Why don't we have a vote on it now while we're here? Next question coming through. Listen, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Chris Mason. I live in Stone Chat Road, Billericay. I just want to make a couple of comments based on what you've said. You mentioned a lot of things. Can you hear okay?
Yeah.
Right. I live in Billericay in Stone Chat Road. I've listened to what you've said. Now, you made a point which I don't agree with. You said that it's every resident in this area's right to write and voice their protest and state their needs, etc., etc. We know all that. But then you went on to say that it wouldn't be sustainable and it wouldn't be effective for every single one of those responses to be responded to individually. I understand all that. You then went on to say that then the council would then just pick up a particular point and refer back and answer on that. That's not acceptable. You then went on to say, preaching to people about you can't see a doctor, there's no schools, there's no shops, there's no infrastructure, etc. All the residents of this area know all of that. That's why they are opposing all this mass development in the area.
Sorry, there's a comment.
All the things you're saying now,
Everything
what
you're
we
saying,
agree with.
we are agreeing with. We're saying that you cannot have development without infrastructure. And that's just a no-brainer.
Good.
No, that's what the infrastructure.
Yeah,
That's all part of the
that is infrastructure. Doctors are infrastructure. That is another requirement.
We have another question.
I spoke to you about this with the doctors, and you told me that all the NHS was consulted, and they come back and said we don't need any more doctors here. Now, how you asked everybody here, we all need more doctors, and yet you're saying to me that the NHS has come back and said we don't need doctors in this area. How can that be right?
Yeah, but all I'm telling you is, you're telling me, and I agree, I live here, my daughter lives here, you know, I've got a vested interest in making sure that this is a good place for her to grow up and be part of. I haven't been able to see my doctor. I had a stroke last year. I haven't seen my doctor in over a year. I've had a phone call and that's it.
I haven't seen my doctor.
But when we speak to the NHS, And at the end of the day, this is a process, and as a council, we have a legal obligation to follow the law. When we consult with an NHS and say, tell us, how many doctors are needed in this area? If the NHS come back and go, we don't think there are any needed, what are we supposed to do?
You are supposed to go back to them. They're saying you're wrong.
This lady, that gentleman.
Yes, well then write to the NHS and tell them that they're wrong.
I've got an idea.
You're the leader of the council. I expect you
Yeah, but
to
I'm not the
be.
leader, I'm not the leader of the NHS.
No,
So the
but I
NHS is
expect
saying they
you to
don't
be
need
saying
doctors.
to the NHS, you're wrong. Speak to my people, my residents. They say you're
And
wrong.
that's what we're doing.
I think the problem is, in all these reports and all these documents, I've not seen anything from the NHS utilities or power or anything to actually mitigate what we need and what we haven't got. I've not seen it. So what you're saying, it's all sort of in the cloud. There's no
Well,
hard.
that's what's wrong
There's
then,
nothing.
isn't
There's
it?
nothing.
It should be in the cloud. It's down here. It's important
Absolutely,
here.
absolutely.
Exactly right
And
now.
yeah. Anyway, let's do the next question.
It's not exactly a question, but it's sort of a comment, as in bearing in mind the fact that about a month ago the government sent out a very strong message which said green belt not to be built on, only brown sites. And so I feel that, I know that our leaders of this group are very aware of that, but I think that's something that we need to re-emphasise to our council, to our government, that that is what they have said. No green belt to be built on, brown sites only. Thank you.
Actually, just to support you, I've got a letter. I have a letter from. Just to support what she said, I have a letter from Baron, which I've given to Sue, saying exactly what she just said. That he said no green belt land will be built on. I can give you that document if you like.
Thank you.
Can we make sure the questions are focusing on Frithwood Lane and the link road coming through Frithwood Lane? Because we know the plan, we know all of the issues around the plan, but we are here today to focus on Frithwood Lane in particular.
We got one question because I was giving him the mic.
It shouldn't be news to you that this is green belt. It's been green belt for a long time. Green belt is defined as permanently open land. And yes, you can go to the National Planning Policy Framework and you can go to the formula for housing, and they do come up with numbers, and they change the calculation of how you get to your numbers, but the numbers depend on your housing target, and your housing target can be controlled by green belt. It's meant to be a restraint. If you can't build anywhere else, then the green belt stops you building. So once you've reduced your housing target, your new formula doesn't come up with the same number. And once you've reduced your target, the housing need doesn't become 120% of the housing need, as it is now. It becomes 100%. So you're reducing a target in two ways. There's a crazy logic, but I don't understand why the council couldn't see this when they first drew up these sites. They could see it, they just didn't care.
No, I won't use that because I'm a teacher, so I'm used to shouting, so it's not a problem. Hi, Terry Knight, living in 2nd Avenue. I know this is meant to be mostly about the road. Clearly there are much wider issues about the housing levels, etc., that we could come to if we have time at the end. But coming back to the road, if you look back at the documentation, in August 2014, Essex Highways produced a report after doing extensive surveys in the area and concluded that making Laindon roads two-way again and making other junction mitigation changes, as they call them, junction changes, was far preferable and much cheaper and achieved the same outcome as building a relief road, and at that point it was scrubbed. That's only 2014, 8 years ago. It was then revisited by the council in 2017 and 2018, and they produced a major piece of work done by Essex Highways, and that included traffic surveys at 12 major junctions in Billericay. And they showed 5 scenarios ranging from where we are now until 2034 in scenario 4, and in scenario 4 it then said this is what it will be like at the end compared to what it's like now. So scenario 4 in 2034, when these housing developments had all been approved, the houses had all been built, they'd done all the junction changes, had built the relief road, and of those 12 junctions, 1 stayed the same, 7 got worse, and only 4 got better. You know, I mean, the numbers are just ridiculous. So after doing all that work, it still wouldn't have worked then. So it was revisited again last year, and many of us have been trying to get the results of this Frithwood consultation out for over 2 years. And despite being on the mailing list, you don't get anything. So I've kept phoning, and finally we got it just about the same time as the councillors. And now what they're trying to propose is yet another, you know, the same road, but if you look at the documentation from May last year, you'll see that it's referred to as a relief road. It relieves traffic, it's a relief road.